Well, the answer is if you don't have a website because you're too lazy to build your own website, then it doesn't make any sense to have email or to have a pay-per-click campaign. So there were too many hosts, and they deserve what they got, who believed in this fairy tale that Airbnb was this magical company they were going to just all partner together and they were both going to make money. Well, Airbnb showed their true color. They're out for themselves. I think that's been proven over and over again. They are reckless. They are ruthless. And anyone that's continued to just put all their eggs into the Airbnb basket deserves what they get.
This is episode number 80 of the Short-Term Rental Success Stories podcast. Are you an investor that's looking to have your home professionally managed? Go to cohostit.com for more information. Welcome back to Short-Term Rental Success Stories. I'm your host, Julian Sage. This is a show where I talk to hosts about their journeys in starting and growing their short-term rental business. My goal is that you'll be able to walk away with practical information that'll help you become a better host and learn how to scale your business. Like any exceptional host, we all strive for 5-star reviews, so please go on over to iTunes and let us know what you enjoy, as it really helps support the show. If you haven't done so already, go on over to our Facebook group, The Host Nation, to connect with the community. Hey, what is going on, Host Nation? I'm super excited to be back again with you this week. Wanted to read a couple of reviews that came in. We have one from ZRush21 saying, whether you're just starting out or have been in the short-term rental industry since day one, this podcast will be helpful to you. Julian brings on a variety of guests who have expertise in a variety of fields and markets. There's undoubtedly something for everyone. Thank you so much, ZRush. We also had another awesome review come in from Arthur Wise saying, again, 5 stars. I'm listening to this podcast every morning on my way to work. Thank you so much to everybody that has been leaving reviews. If you haven't done so, please go on over to iTunes or wherever you listen to the show. I know Spotify and those other platforms are becoming increasingly popular. So please go on over, leave a review. It lets me know that you are enjoying this content. Now you might be saying, Julian, why haven't you been talking to me as much on these shows? Usually you'd have a long drawn out intro and it wouldn't get to the point. And it's really just because I've been keeping my head down and really I haven't had too much to say just because I've been really putting in a lot of work. As all of you may know, we have our coaching program, the Vacation Rental Machine Formula. Our management company co-hosts it, and we just started another branch, another service that we are really starting to develop out right now, which is for our investors. And that is something that I don't want to give away too much information, but we will be maybe doing a little bit of a rebrand, maybe consolidating some of the podcast material and changing some things up in the near future, just because we want to make this as easy as possible. There's a lot of content that we've produced over the past couple of years now, and we really want to be able to just make it very clear as to what we're offering. So I've been doing a lot of work behind the scenes in order to prepare for maybe kind of like a little bit of a relaunch of the brand and the content and how we are providing this information and how we can help people where they are looking for. So whether you're looking for coaching and help, we want to be able to help you with that. If you are looking for management services and looking to actually work with us, we want to be able to help you with that. And if you're looking to invest into short-term rentals and grow your portfolio or just have some nice passive returns, that's something that we are also working on as well. So really becoming the hub for short-term rentals is ultimately the ideal. So lots of stuff working on behind the scenes. So sorry if I haven't been communicating as much. It's just I don't want to give away too much information, but just be excited because there will be some changes coming forward in the future, all to your benefit. One of the practices that I like to incorporate in all aspects of my life and business is minimalism, trying to declutter a lot of the noise and fluff that is out there online or just even in our own businesses and our short-term rentals, stripping away everything that is really just unessential, just white noise, and get to the core message of what you are trying to present. You know, as a creator, as a person that has a vision and a dream, it's very easy to just throw out a bunch of stuff out there and make a lot of noise and things for look really messy. It's like when creating a website or trying to create something, a message, you try to just pack as much stuff as you can into whatever it is that you are trying to show. But then because you're showing so much, it just gets lost. And what I've been doing and constantly working on is trying to remove that stuff and make it just so much easier, whether that is a guest checking into a property or even a listener from the show that's looking for, how to be able to connect with John and I, how to be able to work with us, and even like our shows, asking those questions that get to the point and to the heart, get to the real meat of the conversation. But with all that being said, today I had the honor of speaking with Steve Milo, founder and CEO of Vtrips, a full-service vacation rental management company with over 1,500 properties throughout the U.S. In this episode, Steve shares his journey from 0 to 1,500 properties, how he grew his team and his company, the strategy to increasing his direct bookings, and how Steve prices his properties, and also the impact of advocacy on the vacation rental and urban short-term rental markets. If you like my show notes for this episode, go to shorttermsage.com/STR80, or if you like my show notes sent directly to your inbox every week, then go to shorttermsage.com/show notes. With all that being said, on to this week's conversation. Hey, welcome back, Host Nation, to another episode of Short-Term Rental Success Stories. In this episode, we have the special honor of speaking with Steve Milo. Steve, would you please introduce yourself and let the Host Nation know who you are and what inspired you to get into short-term rentals?
Okay, my name is Steve. My name is Steve Milo. You just mentioned that. I'm the CEO of Vtrips. We've got about a little over 1,600 properties in 5 different states. So we're in Tennessee, South Carolina, Florida, Hawaii, and New Mexico. We're multi-destination, which means we're dealing with mountains, beaches, in resort territories. And what got me into the space is probably what got most of the audience in the space. I bought a vacation rental in 2002, and I started self-managing. Then I took on other people's properties.
And so you just started taking on other people's properties, and then now all of a sudden you have 1,500, or what was that progression like?
Yeah, so I got involved right as the recession was starting. In 2006, I left my. I was in technology. I was director of e-commerce. I left my job and started Vtrips, Vacation Rental Pros, what it was formerly called, back in 2006. And initially, it was word of mouth, and then I started soliciting to the property records, and then over time, I started doing M&A. So I started buying up companies first in my area, and then I started buying companies up outside of my area.
So 2002, when you first purchased your first vacation rental, you started managing it yourself. What was that from around 2002 to 2006? Because 2006, you started Vtrips for about a 4-year period where you just kind of, you just had this one property. When did it kind of click for you that's like, okay, like I can actually make this a really, big business?
Well, started with one, had so much success because I built my own website, started doing, SEO and Google, and started advertising on listing sites like VRBO and other sites at that time that were in existence, like Cyber Rentals. And I had more demand than I had supplies. So I bought a second home, bought a third home. And after that, I decided, I had other people who asked me, could I manage their properties? First, they were, friends, and then they were friends of friends. And by the time it was all over, I was moonlighting, managing 20 properties and trying to run a full-time job. It was a little tough. So it was kind of a progression over a couple of years, just word of mouth and people liking what I was doing.
And what was the switch for you? Why not say like I mean, this is probably during a time where it's probably um a lot more involved with what you had to maybe personally do with, maybe keeping up with the bookings or the pricing. How are you able to sustain both that and your full-time job?
Well, it's kind of what's led me to grow the company. Early on, I did some research and I picked a hosted system called Escapia, which was a leading edge system, property management software system at the time. Escapia was hosted, had pricing, had all kinds of cleaning modules, maintenance modules, accounting modules, income statement. And believe it or not, out of Escapia, I was able to manage almost 100 properties with just myself. It was a lot of work, and I eventually started to need to hire people. But, the technology had just entered the industry at that point, hosted systems, and that's what really enabled me to scale.
You said you were able to manage about 100 properties by yourself with that one system. That was kind of like an all-in-one, like PMS revenue manager, kind of similar to like Guesty or something.
Yeah, I mean, they were guesty before there was guesty. It was actually founded by a guy Chris Kemp, who literally later became the chief technology officer of NASA.
Oh wow. Okay. Still, I mean, 100 properties. Even now, a lot of the hosts that I speak to, I mean, I can't imagine that they could manage 100 properties by by themselves. What was it about that what you were doing that you were able to manage 100 properties with the system that maybe isn't even as advanced as a lot of the tools that we have today?
Just put in a lot of hours. No, I mean, it was kind of crazy. I can't say that I was meeting all the guest service and owner service needs that I needed. And, I started to hire people once I hit about 100 properties. I desperately needed people to kind of just free me up. But it does go to show that, you can be a lot leaner than you probably think if you put your mind to it.
And you were at around 100 properties. At which point was this 2006 with Vtrips?
Well, I think, as I remember, I mean, I was picking up a ton of properties, but I'd say by the middle of 2007, I was over 100 properties. So, basically in about 18 months, it went from the 20 or 25 that I had to about 100.
In 18 months. So what happened in that 18 months that you were able to scale up to around 80 properties? I mean, that's quite the jump.
It was a disruptive event, the recession, right? So, COVID is obviously another huge disruptive event, but the Great Recession, as they call it, happened. And at that point, at least in Florida, there were a number of communities that had just been built, resort communities, rental communities. And in many cases, developers had property management programs. And so homeowners left their properties with these developers because the developers gave them a better rate or promised certain occupancy numbers, et cetera. And when the recession happened, these developers were completely ill-equipped for the dynamics that happened with the recession. In other words, that demand dropped, that you really needed to understand pricing, that you needed to have distribution, and these developers didn't have it. And so literally we had owners who, had very little income all of a sudden coming in, and we're just desperate to find professional property management that could help them. And this was really before even Airbnb. So I started picking up properties because companies in the areas just were doing a terrible job, particularly the development community.
So when you're saying so the developers, similar to maybe like how a condo, they would have vacation rentals, and the MAA on staff would, or they would manage the condos as part of the association. It's the same with the developers of these properties, or was this the same or something different?
Somewhat similar to that what you would experience if you went with an on-site management program. Developers were sometimes they were on site, sometimes they were off site, but they had a management program and they weren't very sophisticated. So, some owners choose to stay with an on site company because they think that there's better services. But in this case, people desperately needed rental income to cover their expenses.
So were you going to the developers, or were you going straight to or were the owners reaching out to you?
Well, first, the developers were happy to unload some of their properties. I mean, I remember they were all smiles as we were transitioning properties from them because they had so many properties and so many disgruntled owners. And as you could imagine, getting rid of disgruntled owners was actually really helpful to them. So they were initially all happy to be unloading these people who were so disgruntled. And then as they kept losing units, they got less and less happy because I just kept taking on more and more units because I was getting such good word of mouth.
And these development communities, is this something that's still a common thing today? A lot of developers offering on-site development, property management.
We haven't seen a lot of new development in a while. So this was really a child of the years between 1992 and 2006, where there was a lot of resort building activity. It was just a huge tidal wave of new development, which actually created a lot of new inventory. So there were communities like Reunion, Ocean Hammock, um, up and down the East Coast and on the West Coast and certain mountain regions had, resort development created where vacation rentals were a big part of it. And the developer had, a rental department within them that would walk the potential prospect buyer in, and they would give them rental income projections and let them know effectively that they had a turnkey management program. So, the management program was really meant to help the sale of the property. And I think when the recession happened, people learned the hard way that, these developers were not strong in property management. They were good at selling, but they weren't good at property management, certainly not revenue management.
So that was a model that eventually kind of died off during the last, during the Great Recession.
Yeah, it died. Condo association management still exists, and there are people who just prefer on-site management. That's a preference, but most of the development communities we haven't seen a whole lot of new development in quite some time now. There was starting to be some just in the last year or two, but that's been slowed down by the latest economic meltdown created by COVID.
So that's pretty interesting because a lot of people, there's a lot of fear in the hosting community right now, with potential of another type of recession or people not wanting to travel, with everything that's going on with COVID. But you're saying that you actually saw your greatest growth during the last recession. Can you speak on that? Is that a normal thing that people are looking for property managers to short rent their properties when things are getting tough, or is that just kind of because of the situation during that unique time?
I think anytime there's disruption, there's opportunity. So there was tremendous amount of opportunity in the last recession. I was still kind of young as a company. I took advantage of some, but not all the opportunity that I could have. Now with COVID-19, there's as much disruption. It's probably more compressed than it was during the Great Recession. So it's all kind of happened kind of instantaneously, whereas the recession took a little bit of time to unwind, and then took longer probably to recover. I think there'll probably be more of a recovery after COVID-19. It'll be a faster recovery, but the bottom probably is more severe. At any rate, this is where the better operators are going to succeed. So hosts that are really strong, have good principles, good software, good technology behind them, and can outperform their competition are going to gain market share. Case in point, um, we're pretty strong with numbers, and we're going to double our profit in 2020 for the second half of the year versus 2019, the second half of the year. So, you know, and you are able to do that only if you are able to drive your revenue numbers higher, which we have. We've driven our revenue numbers for the second half of 2020 higher than 2019, and we've been able to decrease our G&A, and we've also been able to decrease our cost of goods. Um, so all of those things are possible. Now, what that actually means in real time is that we're outpacing our competition, and we're doing that by, essentially better marketing.
Better marketing. So what other marketing? Because a lot of the hosts that listen to the show, they use primarily the OTAs to be able to market their properties. So how are you able to, um, you know, increase your revenue so much more than everybody else?
Well, I'm not sure they use OTAs. I think they use an OTA. So they may use Airbnb or they may use VRBO. And, you know, I would challenge some of these hosts because I've met some of them and I've met some super hosts who put all their eggs in one basket. And I said they were playing Russian roulette. And let's be clear, I'm not a big fan of Airbnb. I think Airbnb has done a disservice to the entire host community by the way they changed their extenuating policy on the fly, and in some cases potentially pushed certain hosts out of business and made a mess between the relationship of the guest and the host by exerting themselves into a position where they didn't really need to be. And they certainly have proven themselves to be supplier unfriendly. I mean, let's be clear about that. Now, VRBO has been better, um, I think much better. And they've certainly taken a better, they've walked a better line in terms of being more balanced. Booking.com has also been more balanced. Um, and, you know, but when we talk about OTAs, and, I've sat on panels with people who um, they were telling me that Airbnb was essentially their marketing engine. They didn't, I, I mean, I cannot believe just the hubris that people had about this stuff with Airbnb. And I challenged people in that room. I said, why don't you have your own website? Why? Why would you not have your own website? Why would you not ask every Airbnb customer for their direct email? Why would you not send email campaigns? Why would you not have a Google AdWords campaign so you could do paid per click? Well, the answer is if you don't have a website because you're too lazy to build your own website, then it doesn't make any sense to have email or to have a pay per click campaign. So there were too many hosts, and they deserve what they got, who believed in this fairy tale that Airbnb was this magical company that was they were going to just all partner together and they were both going to make money. Well, Airbnb showed their true color. They're out for themselves. I think that's been proven over and over again. They are reckless. They are ruthless. And anyone that's continued to just put all their eggs into the Airbnb basket deserves what they get.
Wow, that's some very raw and real thoughts. And what do you is it, does it all come down to, you believe, the laziness? Because, when I think, and probably when a lot of people think of Airbnb, they think of like, maybe Amazon, like that's just where, and it seems kind of like where they're going is to try to have, just be the one-stop shop where everybody goes when they want to be able to, travel in a short-term rental. But you're saying that, people have just gotten lazy because of the amount of leads coming through Airbnb?
Yeah, lazy or naive, either one are recipes for disaster. So look, when I started my business, um, and I wasn't even in business, I was moonlighting. The very first thing I did was build my own website. And there's sites out there like freelance.com where you can build a website for, I don't know, a couple $1,000s. Back when I did it, it was $500. So I use freelance.com all the time. That you can pick up coders from India, Pakistan, etc., and they can build you a WordPress site for not a lot of money. And you can get a transactional site as well. And then, as you mentioned, there's companies like Guesty, Kigo. There's dozens and dozens of companies out there now that are very affordable at the low level, where they offer a property management system plus a web site as part of their toolkit. You can spin off a website. So the reason why I think laziness, and I know it's a strong word, and I don't really care if hosts get offended because I've met a bunch of them, and they were all very smug when I was talking to them about all the different channels they needed to be on. And I looked at a couple of them, and I said, "Hey, you guys are playing Russian roulette with Airbnb. I'm telling you right now." And people consider me to be, oh well, he's just jealous. We're doing so well on Airbnb. I'm like, I can do better on Airbnb. I choose to mark them up so that we aren't dependent. I mean, when I'm still on Airbnb. We still have our properties on there. I just choose to mark them up 15, 20% because the channel doesn't pay all the taxes and because it's more difficult, and I basically self-insure against it. And as a result, we have just a small fraction of our overall business comes from Airbnb. We have another percentage that comes from VRBO. We have another percentage that comes from Expedia. We have another percentage that comes from Booking.com. Then we're now on Google Hotel, and then we do paid click. And then in many regions, we're using niche players. We have a company called SmokyMountain.com in Tennessee that we use. We use players in Hawaii. We use players in Florida. We're even on Ctrip, which is now Trip.com. We're on dozens of OTAs. And it takes time, it takes effort to set them up, and you have to spend time setting them up. But what it means is that all your eggs are not in any one basket. So, yeah, if you're only on Airbnb, it's because you're lazy.
And what does that look like from, a property manager standpoint? If we're trying to help our clients, get the most from their properties, but a lot of maybe managers are really dependent on, let's say Airbnb. Maybe they are listing on different OTAs, maybe they are using a PMS channel manager, but how can we, or how can property managers properly market a property if they're just starting off, or if they're building up their brand and their web presence for someone without maybe being so dependent on Airbnb?
Well, let's talk about having a website first. If you don't have a website, then that's the number one thing that hopefully anyone listening should take away. Half of our volume comes from people coming directly to our website. Half. So 50% of our bookings come from our own direct site, which means that 50% comes from various OTAs. So the reason why your website is so important is because when you start, obviously you're in customer acquisition mode. And so the channels are going to pull leads in and they're going to pull customers. And that's fine. And that's the way you should use these channels. You should use them for customer acquisition. But once you get a customer, shame on you if you don't collect their information, their email, and their mobile number, and the guests and their parties information, so that you can contact them again, and so they book directly with you. And why should they book directly with you? Because your price should always be lower on your website. You should always mark up these OTAs. I don't care what you mark them up, but the lowest price for your customer always should be on your website. And you should let guests know that. Let them know, book again with me directly. Here's my website. Here's my contact information. And we're going to also send you an email every month or every quarter, so it's a reminder of who we are and where we are.
How did you start to build up that web presence and start being able to drive that traffic? So you're saying using the OTAs to be able to collect that guest information, but maybe there's people that they don't have maybe a lot of experience with running paid ads, or they don't have experience with running email campaigns. How some people are just trying to run a property, just trying to manage a property. How can you manage both aspects?
Well, if you can't manage properties, then use a professional property manager. Honestly, I mean, this is kind of an argument where if you're a rent by owner and you don't have the time to do it right, or you're a host, then hire a property manager or a professional that can do it, because for about 20%, we'll do everything. And you can go back and focus on your day job. But if you're going to be a professional host, then do it right. And if you don't know how to do stuff, go to Google, look at YouTube, and teach yourself. I mean, it is not difficult to open up an AdWords account with Google. I mean, it's super simple. Tens of millions of companies and people do it. It's not hard to get a MailChimp account. I mean, these are baseline things that are not difficult to do. And if they're too difficult for you, if you say, well, I'm not good at that, then don't be a host. Go hire a property manager, let them manage your property, and diversify yourself so that you're not dealing with the drama and crisis that people have had to deal with because of COVID-19, and in particular how Airbnb, basically screwed a number of their host community.
Where would you say, do you know what the market is like? Like where is hosting today as far as like professional property managers versus the what's the term that you kept on using, the moonlight property managers?
Well, the best data I have is in North America, it's about 50-50. So 50% of vacation rentals are managed by professional property managers like Vtrips, and about 50% are managed by rent by owners. And I'd say the vast majority of those rent by owners, or hosts, as you call them, are on Airbnb. Although VRBO, look, I mean, they've worked pretty hard, and I think they have a dedicated following as well.
Okay. So do you see a shift in the the short-term rental community? Do you see that that it's going to be shifting more in the future as like Airbnb and their IPO comes out, that there's going to be more of those non-professional hosts versus the property managers? Like, where do you see the shift coming?
Well, I think the pivot's going to be away from small host for sure. I think small hosts got torched, and I think people have recognized that it's not so simple to just list a property, and they're better off time, money, resources to work with a professional manager or work with a super host as opposed to trying to do this on their own. So I think that's the pivot point. I mean, super hosts are basically property managers. I mean, if you're managing more than just your own properties, you're a property manager at that point. I mean, you can call yourself a host or a super host, but it's the same word. We're just, I mean, the only reason why the super host thing is thrown out would be if you're just only on Airbnb, which I've said would be a monumental mistake. I mean, what is the definition of insanity? Doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. I mean, if you haven't learned one thing about COVID-19, it's that you can't trust Airbnb. You can't trust them. They're not a supplier-friendly company.
And even within, you said about 50% you'd say are rent by owner. The other 50 is about the vacation rental property manager. Of those property managers, though, how many, or would you say are actually correctly running the business, utilizing multiple OTAs, channel managers, direct booking site, and diversifying their risk versus just being entirely dependent on maybe Airbnb for their source of leads?
Most professional property managers are not dependent on Airbnb. I'd say most professional property managers are probably more dependent on VRBO. Just the way the industry kind of evolved. Airbnb has been pretty supplier unfriendly, and they haven't done some of the integration work that other OTAs have done that make it so that companies have, that use property management systems can integrate directly. That's really important. So when you get to a size and scale, those direct integrations are critically important because if it's a non-direct integration, it just makes it much more difficult to distribute your inventory. Um, in terms of professional property managers, I'd say it's like many industries. There's probably 20% of the professional property managers who are really, really strong. There's probably 15,000 property managers in North America. So you probably have 3,000 that are really, really strong, good at cross marketing, good at multi-channel marketing, have really strong operations. Um, and that means that in any market that you're in, there's probably one or two really strong professional property management companies.
So going kind of that Pareto's principle where the 20% is taking up the majority of the market, the other 80% are, trying to, get the remaining.
Yeah, I mean, look, I mean, there's place for boutique companies, but I will say COVID has probably tested that. I know that when I talk to some owners, they like boutique property management companies that are smaller because they're more hands-on, I guess, quote unquote. In other words, it kind of feels like a clubhouse. When you walk in, everybody knows your name, and it's charming, and people are bring their kids in and their dogs in and stuff like that, and that's all fun, except for when something like COVID happens and you need a company that is really, really strong with technology and really, really strong with distribution and really has their act together and has navigated through a recession before and knows how to price properly and doesn't panic and doesn't blow your inventory out at low pricing and stuff like that. And I was having a conversation about these pricing tools, and I've come out pretty strongly that anyone that automates their inventory and auto populates it based on pricing tools is really a fool at this point because um, you know there's so many bad competitors who panicked during the COVID situation and just slashed their inventory pricing because they, in some cases, they needed to meet cash flow, and you would not want to have auto pricing set up. We have never had auto pricing set up. We use pricing tools. We would use business intelligence, but I don't allow those business tools to override anything unless I basically go in and readjust those prices. So, you're paying for what you get from a professional property manager, someone like me, who, has knowledge, has experience, knows how to do regression curves, knows how to, really drive pricing. And what we've done for our owners is not only have we gotten better occupancy than the market, we've also gotten better ADR. It's called RevPAR, because a lot of our competition sold out their inventory early on at discounted prices, and we recognize that the what you would call the booking window had compressed, and that they were being foolish, slashing their pricing.
So when you say the auto pricing, are you talking about like the OTAs, like Airbnb's got their smart pricing, or are you saying auto pricing in regards to like dynamic pricing?
Smart pricing, if you just allowed smart pricing to operate, which I think probably some hosts probably call it dumb pricing, then you're a fool. Sure, take their suggestions, but also take a look at. I would really strongly suggest you also look at other business intelligence tools. We use key data, but there's AirDNA, they're out there. There's Transparent. There's a number of tools that are fairly cheap, that give you market data that can help you navigate in a better way than relying on what Airbnb. Look, Airbnb, let's make no secret about what Airbnb's goal. If it was up to them, you would sell your inventory for as low as possible, because they just want to book as many properties as possible and make their guest service fee.
Are you saying though that you're adding another level to those AI dynamic pricing tools, or are you just letting them do what they do and adjust the pricing based off of their intelligence?
Yeah, no, we take their tools, we take our tools, and then we kind of manipulate them together, build regression curves, and take a look at the pricing. And I do it about weekly. Every week, I'm analyzing the data and making price adjustments.
So you, Steve, are still personally going in and modifying the pricing for the 1,500 properties?
Yeah, I mean, if you know how to set up your database, which we do, and you know how to set it up in a way where it's scalable, then it's not a whole lot of effort. It takes a couple hours a week.
Hey, this is Julian, and I wanted to be able to give you our newest book, Airbnb Secrets Revealed: How to Build a Fortune on Airbnb Without Owning Property. In this book, we talk about the concepts of rental arbitrage investing, as well as co-hosting, and how you can build a business leveraging other people's properties. This book is perfect for the new short-term rental investor, and it's something that I wish that I had when I first started, as it would have saved me a lot of trouble and helped me to understand how to be able to leverage the power of short-term rental investing in your own real estate portfolio. If you'd like to get our newest book completely for free, go to shorttermsage.com/free book. Now, back to the show. How does that work across different markets though? Are you saying that these same and regression? You said that you're using looking at regression. Is that something that you're doing across each individual market, or is that more like a portfolio as a whole?
No, it's market by market. So we've set up. We have 14 revenue markets, and then we build pricing and seasonality based on each of those markets and based on historical data. So, the mountains of Tennessee, Gatlinburg, have a much different seasonality and pricing in high seasons than, let's say, Southwest Florida, Fort Myers, or Siesta Key. They're just two completely different markets. So the first thing is you have to build revenue groups and pricing components within each revenue market. And you have to also take a look at the regression curve or statistical modeling for each market as well. And then you're going to look at past performance, and the tools that actually get source data as opposed to scrape data have much more insight. So key data actually gets source data, which means you can go back and take a look at your competitors. Well, it's a group of competitors, historical data. And then you're going to take a look at the current trends, and you're going to take a look at your current window, and then you're going to make assumptions based on the current booking window. So, for example, right now, probably a lot of your hosts are trying to look at how do they price their December and early January pricing. So we've concluded, give or take, depending on market, that we've booked about 25% of our inventory, which means another 75% of our inventory will book over the next 90 days or so. And based on that, we layered in certain pricing. I actually raised all our prices. We had raised them the middle of May, and then we raised them again the middle of June. So a lot of our pricing for December was already up 30%, and then I layered on additional pricing because I was forecasting based on data from August and September that actually we wouldn't even be close to Christmas demand until 60 days in, because people are waiting, and the window is compressing as to when people are booking. And you're probably going to have people booking Christmas, New Year's, in some cases, if inventory is still available, 10 days prior. We saw that for Labor Day. I mean, for Labor Day weekend, we still had some inventory left because we were careful and calculated, and we saw people within 10 days booking that. So what's happened is understanding, the booking curve and understanding the compression of the window helps you adjust pricing. So what you want to do in terms of dynamic pricing is you want to have a steady reduction of inventory, and you want to yield the most revenue possible out of that. And the way to do that, one is with pricing, but two is with booking rules. And booking rules are essentially the other layer that is dynamic, which is the amount of minimum nights that you require for peak days or peak weeks. And so for Christmas right now, we're requiring a 5-day minimum. It will reduce to 4 days within 60 days. We're saying with Thanksgiving, we're at a 4-night minimum right now for Thanksgiving. We actually, in the past, at 45 days within Thanksgiving, we would go to a 3-night minimum, but we're holding firm on 4 nights because of the dynamics of what's happened with COVID-19, where a lot of our competition, quote unquote, cruise ships, hotels are no longer really options. So we can afford to drive those longer stays through booking rules, and which means that your inventory doesn't book as fast, but you ultimately are going to yield up the revenue that you should get by holding firm to your booking rules and your pricing availability.
I'm sure that maybe a lot of people probably glazed over right now. You're getting into the weeds, which is really really nice, because there's a lot of people that are listening to this and they're just like, Steve talked about regression curves. You talked about some other tools that maybe they're not as familiar with, but essentially what you're doing is you're using pacing. Right, you're using pacing and you're using this regression curve. So you're looking at tools like key data, looking at past performance, historical data, and then you're kind of projecting into the future, and then using pacing as basically a way to say, like, where, like what you said, you were getting booked up way too quick in December, which means that you had to raise your prices. So now that you can kind of slow the trend into Q1 of 2021.
Yeah, that's correct. And that's based on a sample size of 25% occupancy. So, or projected occupancy, 25% of what our projected occupancy will be. So, if you have a head for numbers, that's what you're doing. I mean, you're constantly looking at the data, the business intelligence, but at the end of the day, I do not automate it. I make sure that it's all manual, how we do price adjustments and booking rules.
Let's say, because there are a lot of hosts that listen to the show that aren't in maybe vacation destinations. There's a lot of urban hosts out there, and key data, I believe they only use based off of other members who are utilizing key data, correct?
Yeah, and we're only in resort areas, so I can't really speak to the urban market. We've kind of stayed away from urban. AirDNA and Transparent, I think, are stronger on the urban side.
Okay, so you would still recommend looking at tools like AirDNA or the other one in regards to trying to find that regression curve, and base your dynamic pricing and your pacing off of that data?
Well, they're business intelligence tools. I mean, again, I would take a look at your own internal data. I'd take a look. I mean, one of the things I do is I take a look at school system calendars. And so in any place we're in, I take a look at the top 10 or 20 high schools in the area just to try to understand what their calendars are. Again, the calendars have shifted this year, and understanding when those school breaks is pretty important. So um, understanding if there's event weekends if they're actually going to be open. So, some of the markets, outdoor events are starting to happen now. And those can be pretty strong right now because there's a lot of pent up demand. So you have to layer in business intelligence tools with understanding your own local market, understanding things like high schools and what their school system breaks are. Take a look at your own historical data, and particularly your most recent data, because that's going to be the most important to try to figure out what as you're calling pacing, your pacing is. So, we have seen a complete change in pacing, which I think is going to continue for the foreseeable future.
And does that worry you at all, or do you feel like you're really shooting into the dark right now, or is there a way to be able to confidently move forward with properties, or is it just because of experience?
Well, I mean, we do budgets, right? So every every year we do a budget. Every quarter we do a reforecast. And recently we've been doing more regular reforecasts because we're doing better than our budget. So we're trying to just figure out, where we'll end the year. At the end of the day, we're very metrics driven, very numbers driven. And, we're looking at, how are we maximizing revenue? And, anyone who's listening should be thinking the same thing. How do they maximize revenue? It's not about how many nights you book. It's about what's the revenue per night. That's called RevPAR. And how strong are you doing? And if you're not using tools, you can't even tell versus your competition how you're doing. I mean, we know we're outpacing our competition significantly because we can take a look at how we're doing versus how our competition is doing. And we know that there's been some pretty unsophisticated competitors who have just really discounted their prices, which, is inexcusable if you're a professional host.
Going back to, I want to be able to talk a little bit more about that, your company and how you've been able to grow it without, ruining that experience. What was your progression like as far as like who you started to hire, or the tools that you started to add on? Like, was there? I imagine you said when you got to around 100 properties, you said you really needed to start hiring people. What were those first people that you did start to have to hire?
Well, we started hiring reservation agents first just to answer the phones. Now, that's not really that important these days, but we still get about 20% of our volume from the phones. And some of our bigger orders, average orders, length of stay, are coming from the phones. And the thing we're doing is we're not just doing inbound, but we're also doing outbound. So our reservation agents have to do 30 outbound calls per day, which, again, because we use a lead management system, we capture everybody who calls us, every customer who's booked with us in the past. And so we're outbounding, which again is a discipline, right? So, in order to really create ultimate yield management, it's everything. You have to do everything. You have to do outbound. You have to have some form of offline reservations to capture people in particular who are asking questions about, you know, properties, length of stay, what's open, what's closed, etc. And so we have that reservation staffed internally. And then after that, some of my next hires were in the accounting department, um, and we progressed since then. Now, when I first started, we were using a lot of independent contractors, and I've kind of shifted to hiring full-time employees to do housekeeping and maintenance work. And COVID has certainly helped in that regard as well. So we're at about 140 people now, but part of it is because we're using far less independent contractors than we were before, and then part of it also is that we've got a fairly robust team to help with integration and M&As.
How many is part of like your core team aside from like turnover cleaners and maintenance and stuff like that? Like who's in the office actually running the the property management side?
Well, we got 60 people in our headquarters, so that's our core G&A. We have 14 offices throughout the country, so we've got a little bit of staffing in each of those offices, and then we've got core uh, group of accounting, IT, marketing, um, and owner management in our corporate headquarters in which is right outside of Jacksonville, Florida.
So when you started expanding out to different markets, did you have to hire local people? Because you said you have local headquarters. What's kind of the purpose of those?
Well, the local, I mean, I'm a big believer in boots in the ground. So we have local offices. Every place we have an office, and we have a handful of people that do guest service or owner service in those offices. Some offices are big. Our Tennessee office has 30 people in it. Our New Mexico offices have 12, 14 people in them. So it depends on the amount of properties we have. But, you know, again, professional property management, cleaning is critical component. And we have two laundry facilities that we own. One in Tennessee and one in Florida that services all of our Florida and South Carolina properties, and the one in Tennessee is managing all the things in Gatlinburg and Pigeon Forge. But boots on the ground, having cleaning facilities, managing linens, and all the type of cleaning that you need to do, particularly in a COVID environment, is critically important. And we have that. And again, I mean, that's one of the reasons why we are picking up some former host and rent by owners, because it's just a much more difficult environment to operate in right now.
So your offices at these different locations handle more of the hands-on operations, dealing with the turnovers, dealing with maybe inspections and other, like, what are the different roles that they play?
So guest services would be, issues guests would bring up about the property, dispatching service technicians, cleaning, property care inspections. Basically, we're doing all the hands-on maintenance and cleaning that properties require. And in resort communities in the past, labor was scarce. It was hard to get handymen. It was hard to get cleaners in some of these properties. And in many cases, we're doing back-to-back cleans, which means, one guest is departing, another guest is arriving. And so, we clean the properties, we inspect the properties, and get the property ready within a window of 4 or 5 hours. And we have to service the property too, in many cases, if service technician couldn't get into the unit while the guests were there. So, we're talking a lot of sophistication. And, we have properties as big as 11 bedrooms. So some of these properties are pretty big structures. They're not just little studio apartments. So, it's a big operation, and you have to have the infrastructure, and you have to have people in the field to be able to manage and handle the operational components.
You said that you're not looking, or you're not really growing into the urban markets. What as a professional vacation rental property manager, what do you think of like this new or of more of these urban properties, and that Airbnb has really kind of, I feel like they've really kind of grown, they've really flourished the more non-professional host, just the person that's looking to rent their space. Do you see a shift in how short-term rentals is kind of moving towards?
Well, I'm happy that we never went into urban. That doesn't mean there's not an opportunity in urban. I would certainly recommend to hosts at this point. Most likely, prices in urban markets are going to go down. There's going to be a restructuring of values in urban markets. Some urban markets, I think, governments have shown them to be anti-vacation rentals. Other urban markets have been more friendly to vacation rentals. So there's a lot of disruption. I think hosts should really take a look carefully at prices as they drop. I don't think we're even close to urban markets settling. And I mean, there's so many dynamics that are working against urban markets right now in terms of price depreciation. But at some point, prices will hit bottom, might be 18 months from now. And there's probably buying opportunities for hosts. Certainly, if you're a super host and you can pick up inventory on and manage it, and you don't have to buy the asset, then it's a no-brainer, because I think some of these urban markets will come back. They're going to have to. The governments are going to have to be supportive of tourism because they need jobs. So, the urban markets right now, I think, are a tough place to operate. But particularly domestically, most of them will come back in some form.
And why do you have where are these thoughts coming from, like urban markets? Why do you feel that they would be taking the biggest hit as opposed to more vacation destinations?
Well, urban markets right now have taken a big hit because a lot of the urban areas are closed. Restaurants, bars, um, activities, sporting events, theaters, they're all shut down. Even some places, when it's extreme, is shutting down parks and beaches. So right there, you have that. Then you have social distancing, and then you have social unrest. So there's a lot of reasons why um, urban has really suffered um, versus resort areas like mountains, lakes, and beaches, which obviously have a lot more social distancing and you know are less prone to some of the social unrest that may cause travelers to think that they may not want to go to a place until things get, I guess, more stable. I mean, safety and security is a big issue. I mean, I know, there's some sensitivity to talking about this, but I mean, people want to feel secure. If they're bringing their family somewhere, safety is a major issue, and you want to go to a destination where you're feeling safe about bringing your family.
And I know, prior to the call, you said you're very involved in the advocacy, and I'd love to be able to keep on talking about operations and other things, but we do have to start to wrap this up. But in regards to urban areas and advocacy and even vacation destinations, how when I typically think of a lot of changes in regulations and policies, it typically is in those more urban areas. How is regulations changing, affecting vacation destinations as well? Is that something that is really, like, when I think of Gatlinburg or Pigeon Forge, I don't typically think like, oh, they're going to be changing their policies. So how does advocacy play for us as property managers?
Advocacy plays, I think it's the number one issue that hosts and property managers really need to be thinking about, because literally you can be zoned out by a government within almost a blink of an eye. And you're right that urban destinations are more prone to government officials zoning, short-term vacation rentals out of existence than resort areas. And that's another reason that I'm not. I haven't gone into urban areas. I think there's a lot more risk going into urban, and I think there's a lot of potential legislation coming our way that could zone vacation rentals out of urban areas just because of fear of quote unquote strangers, or this notion that hosts were bringing in people illicitly that may have been not following quarantine or other CDC guidelines, and that people that were in those buildings that were residents basically were going to government officials saying you have to stop this. Resort communities tend to be less prone to that because the communities tend to be dependent on tourism from an economic standpoint. But still, we have seen as people retire to local resort areas, um, they vote. And a lot of people who own properties in these resort communities don't live there, so they can't vote. So you can have a very small percentage of people who vote who can impact, the people who get elected, and they can impact public policy. The answer really is, at the end of the day, to try to go to the state level and work with state officials to protect the vacation rental industry. And in the state of Florida, we're doing that. There was an economic impact study that was co-funded by the realtor community and the vacation rental community. And, the economic impact for the state of Florida for vacation rentals, and we're talking all vacation rentals. When I say vacation rentals, we're talking Airbnb, VRBO, anything that's vacation rental oriented, was $26 billion. And they broke it down by the state, and then they had 30 different counties they broke it down. And that economic impact is not just the amount of bed tax or the amount of rent that people pay, but also the meals they spend, and the tickets and the attractions, groceries, gas, you name it. the amount of money that is poured into the economy, the amount of jobs that come out of that. And, it's important to go to the state level because the state is going to be less prone to, local senior citizens coming up and complaining about people renting property next to them. They're certainly going to look at it in a more even-handed way about jobs, tax revenue, tax basis. And, so we're in the process of hiring a lobbyist in the state of Florida. We did that back in 2011. That's why, the state preempts local laws in Florida from being able to ban vacation rentals in the state of Florida, just like Arizona. So, you know, we're, I'd love to talk more about advocacy, but it's a passion of mine. I'm chairman of the advocacy committee for the Vacation Rental Manager Association. We just raised $250,000. We're going to start raising money for Florida, and it's going to take an organized effort because right now our biggest opponent is hotels, and hotels are very, very threatened by vacation rentals, and they're using this opportunity with COVID to kind of take isolated examples and use them against us. And we know there's some bad apples in this industry, but those are far the exception. And the only way that we can be heard is to have a voice in that room and to be able to talk to politicians, governors, and things like that, and to basically, go hand in hand together. And that's what advocacy is. Advocacy is basically making sure you're represented at the table. Because if you're not at the table, you're on the menu.
How does that advocacy work when it's maybe coming down to like local, local county level? When you're talking about a state, that's a much wider scope. But there's a lot of hosts out there, and a lot of our listeners, are in those urban markets as well, where there's a lot of uncertainty, or where they maybe don't have any set regulations in place, but there's maybe talk of that. How can people get involved when different advocacy groups are, maybe to have different agendas or different priorities in what they're trying to resolve at that time?
Well, in the county I live in, I know all 5 of the commissioners by name. I've met them for coffee or I've met them informally. I've donated money. I've had political fundraisers. Um, you know, it's effort, just like everything else. I mean, you have to put the time into getting to know these people. It kind of resonates that you're a business person with them, depending on their political philosophy. Um, and just putting economic impact studies in their hands has been extremely helpful because in many cases they just didn't know how big vacation rentals were for an impact to the county. So when I sit with them and I have conversation with them, in many cases it's an educational conversation about what kind of industry we have and how big it is and how important it is for the county.
Do you think that that's like how much of the business, because running a property management company now, it's like people get into this just because they have a property and they're just trying to make some money, and they realize that they can build a business. Some people just keep it as a very hands-off approach, but then if they were trying to scale it like you did, now you're hiring people, now you're getting into you're building a business, you have the websites, you're doing outbound lead generation, all of these different things, and now you're talking about advocacy as well. Like how does Steve spread out his time and his priorities within his business when you have your hands in so many different things?
Wake up early, work late.
Yeah.
Not business. It's not a business for people that don't have a lot of energy.
So people get into the vacation rental industry so that they can maybe vacation more, so they can relax more. But you're saying no, it's just work nonstop. You have to constantly be working.
If you don't have the time, hire a property manager. That's all I can say. If you can't do this, there's people like me who can manage your property, represent you, and make sure you actually will probably generate more revenue with us to cover our commission. So really think through how much of this is worth, because your time is worth something.
Yeah. People like Steve, they're taking all the work, so you can actually enjoy your vacation rental instead of slaving away to it. What would you do differently if you had to start from scratch?
Um, I'm really fascinated by the development side of this business. I mean, I am playing around with some development up in Tennessee, and I think there's an opportunity to build, purpose-built vacation rental from scratch. So I'm very, very interested in what I think will be the next wave of development of this inventory, because I think inventory is really the biggest constraint, at least in the resort area. Urban, I think there's going to be a lot of inventory, and there'll be an opportunity in urban because of that. But in the resort area, inventory is very constrained right now.
So if you could go back, you would kind of do what those development companies were doing when you started picking up during the last recession.
Yeah, I mean, but obviously in a much more educated manner.
And how so when you say like an educated manner?
Well, I mean, I think purpose built, right? So purpose built means you don't build a second home, you build a rental property, and you really are thoughtful about the amenities that are centralized to those properties. And you know, putting thought into a development makes a lot of sense down the road. So if it's going to be a rental community, build it as a rental community.
Where do you see the property management globally in regards to advocacy? I know that we've got a lot of different companies that are up and coming, and we have other we have Evolve, we have Vacasa that have been around for a while, but where do you see the global consensus on advocacy?
Well, we're in the early stages. And clearly, I've made this a major issue of mine. And I do work with Vacasa. They actually donated quite a bit of money. I'm just trying to get all the larger companies together and basically say, look, we've got to work together in a tent. We're really not competition. I mean, Evolve and Vacasa, I mean, we may be in certain markets, but we're really not competition. We need to work together. We all need to work together and build the biggest tent we can on advocacy. Well, a year ago we raised 100,000. This year we raised $250,000. Now we have a coalition for the state of Florida. I mean, it's baby steps, but I helped get the preemption law passed in the state of Florida. I was directly involved, and I'm looking forward to build Florida into a model that hopefully can be adopted into other states. So I'm hoping that's one of the legacies that I can leave this industry with, is how important advocacy is to protecting everyone's property rights, their investment, and their business.
Do you think that there's not enough of these larger players that are doing putting a role, like not discrediting your size or anything, but there are very large property management companies that they're focused maybe more on the growth. Why leave everything up to maybe smaller or independent or property managers? Like, why are the larger ones really playing a big role in advocacy?
I would say probably 5% of the property managers and hosts probably are involved in advocacy or donate some level of money, which is one of the reasons why we've had such a bad record of being zoned out in critical cities and critical counties and areas. Frankly, Airbnb hasn't done us a lot of favors in some markets where they've gone in and basically talked about shared versus professional or hosted management. So we all need to understand that this is a business, and advocacy is a critical component, because the governments have shown over and over again a willingness to zone us out of business. And it's going to take not 5% of us working together. It's going to take 50% or more of us working together.
And where would you say, there's also kind of been a surgence of more advocacy groups starting up. What's the best way for someone to be able to know, like, which advocacy group that they should be actively participating in, which one's goals or priorities are in line with the right way?
I know Vacation Rental Manager Association, that may not be for every host, but it's the association that's for professional managers. Matt Landau, who has a TV show and does a number of podcasts, is also working on his version, which I think will be a little bit smaller for hosts. So those are two resources that you can choose to follow and gather more information.
Okay. And what would be the best way if someone wants to be able to reach out to you, Steve, if they have any more questions or they want to be able to find out more about you and your company?
Steve.milo at vtrips.com.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Steve, for taking the time. And until next time, Host Nation, keep on hosting.
Thank you, Dylan.
Hope you hosts benefited from the show. If you found value, please go on over to iTunes, leave us a review, and let us know what you enjoy about the show. If you'd like to talk to hosts that have been featured in these episodes as well as the community, go on over to our Facebook group, The Host Nation.